Hey there, and welcome to Comedians on Technology, People, and Drugs. As always, I'm your host, Sam Joseph, and today we're very lucky to have comedian Penelope Vee with us. Hey, Penelope, it's really great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, Penelope, you're a very funny person, and I think our teaming audience members, there are at least there's millions of them. They're sort of stamping their feet and saying they want to understand your comedy origin story. Was it that you were sort of like originally an ITV children's presenter, and that someone had put a zip over your mouth, and you sort of ripped that off, and jokes came out? How did it all start?
Yeah, I mean, it's, nothing as fantastical as that, but yeah. So it actually started when I was a teenager. So I've been doing comedy on and off for a while, but I officially started when I was about 18.
Hmm.
And, whenever people ask me this, it starts off sad, but I'll explain. So I was actually always, more into drama, but I was also very depressed. So I was a really sad child, which sounds like I probably shouldn't say that, but it was on and off. And one of the things that the child psychiatrist would recommend is distract yourself and watch funny things and stuff like that. So I would actually spend a lot of time watching stand-up comedy.
Mm.
And it got to a point where, I was, I started to feel better. And I was watching, it's actually Bo Burnham I was watching one day.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, I was like, I could do this. Like, I don't know, that thought popped into my head. And so I started to write. And I would just like write little things, about my life or about my favorite TV shows, my brothers, whatever. And my oldest brother took me to my first open mic. It was a mixed open mic because it was like music, comedy, everything. And I got up and genuinely, no one believes me, but it killed. It was a
Mm.
really, really good show. And obviously, I'm still a teenager, but I was like, wow, this is something I could probably do.
Mm.
So I think it's kind of ironic to think that like from that moment, well, period of time of, depression and feeling like this could be, a way to help me, it turned into, okay, I can actually do this and I could hopefully, be that person for someone. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Brilliant, amazing, yes, and thanks so much for mentioning the depression, as well as all the other great things, not just focusing on the depression. We've spoken about that kind of thing on the podcast before. I think Ella Clark episode that was she that's been a big struggle in her life, and she's found meds, and I think she's got it under control, and she's an amazing stand up, and I think yeah, it's I think that there's definitely, I mean, actually the thing that originally or sort of re-triggered me to try stand up again about 5 years ago was an article about it was in the Guardian about a journalist who was struggling with anxiety and depression, and then did stand up, and that sort of really helped him at that time. So I think it's I mean, it's very important to talk about these mental health things and how they fit into the picture, and how stand up can help.
100%. And I think a lot of people find it ironic or they can't like figure out how that can be in terms of like performers, because I actually know a lot of performers who struggle with depression and with mental health. And I almost think it's almost like the performer's curse, is in like you create stuff and you entertain people and you make
Mm.
people happy or laugh or cry or whatever. And yet there's this emotional turmoil that you're facing. So, in a way, you know, not to sound like poetic and stuff, in a way, I think that that kind of combination is it's tricky, but it's sort of beautiful in a way because it's
Mm.
like you're still able to find the light in the darkness.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. It's well, and it reminds me of somebody who was at university with, who was actually was a concert pianist who had an injury and then couldn't do her piano anymore. And I know that she switched to doing research, and she was doing research into this, the relationship between creativity and mental health. And there's some odd connections there that
Mm.
yeah, it's a funny, I mean, I guess I don't want to like say people who are not in the creative arts, oh, they have it easy. They don't have any mental health problems. But although I think, everybody has, there's all different kinds of like whether one is doing, a job that's specifically in the creative arts versus any kind of job or any kind of life,
Yeah.
well, one needs to come up with, creative, solutions to whatever challenges that you're facing. And yeah, there's something about being able to be creative that maybe also opens you up to anxiety and depression and so on. Yeah, yeah. And well, I'm really interested to kind of like focus in on the on that first gig. And so you'd been watching lots of stand up, and then did for that you went along to that first kind of mixed open mic with the different things with the idea that you'd prepared like a little set that you were going to do for that show.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd written, and this is before I knew about like, a type 5 or a 10 or
Right,
whatever.
right.
So I literally just prepared like just like a handful of jokes because I think they said it's like each person you have the length of a song or two songs or whatever. So if you're doing poetry, as long as it's within that thing.
Mm.
So yeah, I think I do remember making a joke about Smallville, which was one of my favorite shows as a
Hmm.
kid.
Hmm.
Um, so, and, jokes about growing up in a house full of brothers and just like simple stuff, nothing, not like the controversial material I'm putting out today. But
Hmm.
yeah, so yeah, it was a blast, and it was a first time for everything. I think my brother still has the video. Actually, I looked
Wow.
tiny, so maybe I'll release that at some point.
Mhm. Yeah, and so like, for a lot of people, like doing stand-up comedy is kind of like that's oh, what trying to be funny in front of strangers, the big fear. You were not intimidated by it. Was it kind of like did you feel very nervous in the run up to it, or you were kind of like, yeah, I'm going to give it a try. Who knows?
No, I wasn't very nervous. That's the thing. I feel like I I don't know. I always make jokes about how like performers were attention seekers at heart. And I feel like I definitely was kind of like that because I genuinely don't feel scared to talk to strangers. Like I like even if I'm on the tube and someone's reading a cool book, I'll talk to them. So that's
Mm.
always been exciting to me rather than fearful. But also it's like when I was really young, back in Africa, and my parents would have like visitors come over, I'd put on like a little like music video show for them, which like the songs were always Britney Spears, which is not appropriate for a child to be dancing to, but whatever. But my point is, I've always sort of loved, performing, and so it's not really been like a me versus them kind of thing. Like there's no like fear,
Mm.
um, and I think weirdly enough, maybe there's more anxiety now than it was when I started,
Really?
and I don't know why that is actually.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, and then so I mean, you had a great set, and how was the feeling after the show? I presume elated, and you were like, I must do this again, or how did it feel?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like my eyes were open, which sounds dramatic, but genuine because I'd not done something like that before. Like I'd done like plays and stuff in school,
Mm.
but to do something by yourself, something that you wrote, created, and
Yeah,
so yeah, it felt like wow, I need to keep doing this thing because it's fun.
right,
It
right.
was like the first time you try crack. Can I say crack on here?
You can say whatever you like on here. Yeah, it's still
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was like the comedy crack. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, yeah, and good stuff. Well, the Irish are well into that comedy crack, aren't they? It's because we have Crack Up Comedy. It's actually running this evening in Watford. Yeah, yeah, good show. And so then, what did it look like after that? Were you trying to get, I mean, we've talked to many different comedians, and some people. Like myself and others sort of catch the bug and then it's like, oh, I've got to have it like regularly, regularly, regularly. Other people, they do the first one, that's nice, and then they, don't do it again for 6 months. Or yeah, how did it follow on for you?
Yeah, that's actually interesting because for me, I did it for a little while for like for the maybe first few months following that.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I'm still very young, so then I actually leave it and just do other things in my life for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So I left it for a while. Like I'm 28 now, so it's like, yeah. And then started it up again, um, like, a few years ago.
Mm.
And yeah, and then just sort of picked up where I left off. And yeah.
Yeah, and what was there then? Was that restarting it? Was that then a big change? I mean, obviously you've been doing other things for a few years, and then
Yeah.
you're like the. I mean, in the same way that it was great to hear about how the the build up for the first one. Watching a lot of stand-up comedy, your brother taking you to the mixed open mic. Was the restarting? Was there some particular chance of fate that led you to try it out again, or what happened there?
I feel like that one I don't fully remember as
Hmm.
clearly. I think I don't know. I think I just like remembered liking it, and I was like, I'm gonna try and do this thing again. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think I had also spent a lot of time in London, and obviously there's, throw a stone in London, you hit three comedy clubs.
Indeed.
So um, it was something that's really accessible to me. So I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna start doing it again.
Great, great. And then getting back on the stand-up stage after that break of 4 to 5 years, what was that like? Was it just as you remembered it? Was it different somehow?
I think it was different, mainly because like I was different. Like I obviously had grown up and life had happened and things had changed. But there was still that love, there was still that adrenaline and that passion when I'm writing about, things that have happened.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think it was different, but that love was still there.
Yeah. So I mean, you got back up and it was enjoyable again. And then, so like for the last few years, what does the comedy practice look like? Are you finding yourself, oh, I've got to gig as much as I can, or you're taking regular breaks, or how? What's the sort of frequency and the sort of places that you're getting up?
Yeah, I mean, I should gig more, the more than I do. Um, I actually had like a strategy this year, and I was like, cool, I'm just gonna perfect this and then get a 20 and then do a
Mm.
half an hour and blah blah blah.
Mm.
Um, so I'm still have those things, but it's funny because obviously I'm balancing a you know real life job that's kind
Sure.
of high stakes, and
Hmm.
as well as life happening and relationships and breakups and all that. And I am the kind of person that like I put myself all into everything I do,
Hmm.
um, which can be good, but also can be bad because if you put yourself all into something,
Mm.
it doesn't work out, that could actually derail you for like the next few months of your life.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like I don't gig as much, but I have things planned, and I'm trying to like just reorganize myself, and I'll also contact places that I would really like to perform at.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Life indeed happening, and so many comedians balancing the real life and the job, and this sort of side hustle that we
Yeah.
have for the comedy. Yeah, yeah. Well, let us slide on into our second question, which is about how technology is affecting your life and comedy. And as I often say at this point, by technology, some people are like, "Oh, well, you must mean like the latest computers or AI," and I'm or social media, which I'm very interested in how that affects what you do. But a pencil and paper a sort of a memory mnemonic, all of these things are a kind of technology. So I'm sort of a big net, really, really interested in how any of these, the modern world or, the different styles of doing things are impacting how you run your life and your comedy. And of course, it's a bit of a subtext because I'm like really interested to hear from every comedian like their comedic process or indeed their life process, how they get stuff done. So yeah, are you a big technology fan, or you like to keep it super simple? How does it work for you?
I'm kind of a mix. Like I'm not one of those people who are like very anti technology. I think in terms of like the digital stuff, I actually was a bit of a weird kid that like I was fascinated with the idea of the singularity and
Oh.
human intelligence going to the digital age and all that. But I think in terms of like comedy and writing, I did start off always writing on like I don't even have it with me, but a notebook and a pen,
Mm.
and just so I can jot it down because I feel like if I write it, as soon as possible. It's easy to sort of map out things, edit
Hmm.
things, draw
Hmm.
arrows, blah blah blah. But I think now I have traded that for my iPad. So in the Notes
Hmm.
app is where I write literally all of my jokes.
Right.
Um, so and then once I'm happy and I've, you know, formulated that, I've tried it out already and it's good, then I'll move it over to a Google Doc and like save that forever.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I have this sort of love-hate relation with Google Docs because they're sort of reliable, but they you have to kind of like say I'm going to edit now, and it's got this like two modes where you have to move it back and forwards between view and edit. This is on the phone,
Yeah.
and like, but I use it because I remember when I first started, I was doing like loads of notes in the iPhone Notes app, and then one time it kind of like there was some strange sync, and I lost all of my notes from the first 2 months, and I was like, um,
Yeah.
but
That's I'm actually worried about that a little bit because my both my phone and my tablet run out of space all the time.
mm.
So I really should be backing stuff up.
Yeah, it's the Google Doc is a kind of does seem to be a good solution for that. I mean, I've never lost anything. I mean, I'm sort of running out of space in my Google Doc at the moment. They keep wanting me to pay more money for it, but I've never lost. The Google Doc, the way it sort of syncs it into the cloud and then it's available on every device seems to
Yeah.
be pretty reliable, really. Well, you mentioned the AI and singularity. I mean, I'm very excited about that myself, or the concepts at least. I mean, it's sort of what's happening recently. You wonder if the singularity is getting closer. I don't know, or maybe it's getting further away. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people are like very anti-AI because, I guess the way that it processes things and, water and they're worried about the effects of the
Right.
environment.
Right.
So like I get that. But I guess it kind of reminds me of how when social media first came about, everyone was like, "Oh, this is the worst thing ever because it's making people dumber. It's doing." Well, I'm like, no, like it's a tool, and
Mm.
it's all about how you use that tool.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you're using social media all day to just play Candy Crush and stalk your ex on Facebook, like that's on you. You're making yourself dumber. So it's like, how you use a tool doesn't change the value of that tool. Like it's
Mm.
it's all about what you're actually doing on it. And I think that people in, our industry in comedy or acting or whatever, um, it's actually shifting towards being more social media heavy.
Mm.
Um, I was at this is like a derail
No worries.
tangent. That I was at a Spotlight event. Spotlight is like the database for like all actors in UK.
Hmm.
Um, and like they were talking about like verticals and which is like a form of media now where it's like, do you know what verticals are?
Um, I in like marketing, like verticals. We're talking about
Mm,
like no.
no, so verticals are like they're like if you might have seen some of these adverts on like Instagram or TikTok, but it's a movie or a show, but it's cut into like different segments, like 10-minute segments,
Okay.
and it's shot vertically, meant to be consumed on a phone, and it's a
Okay.
huge thing in like the acting world that's like rising up. And basically, they were talking about how now a lot of people are casting based on people's followers. So if they
Oh yeah.
see, yeah, and I think that's a huge problem because it's like your talent isn't. People can also buy followers, so
Right.
your talent isn't defined by whether or not you have 1,000 followers versus 10,000 or 100,000.
Mm. But yeah, I mean, I guess that for the people who are at some level saying like, oh, well, let's get involved with these people because these people already have their own kind of like
Yeah, a
marketing
built-in audience.
stream. You like, yeah, it's yeah, it's an interesting development, isn't it? Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, how are you feeling about? I mean, you just talked very eloquently about the social media AI. They're both tools, and it depends on how you use them. Yeah, how are you using them at the moment, and how do you feel about their way that they're being used?
Mm, I think I use them kind of as needed, as in like most of my social media, well, it depends actually. Because we'll get to this possibly on the question about relationships and stuff. But,
Uh,
um, you know, it's funny because my Twitter is usually used for like jokes and, building that kind of thing.
oh yeah.
Um, Whereas from the past few months, because I've been going through something, I've actually been using my Twitter as like a sounding board, as like my diary,
Okay.
which is not good or healthy. But I feel like in a way, because I've cultivated a habit of being online and existing online, because
Mm,
I joined Twitter before you could actually join Twitter. Like I joined when I was like 10, and then when they had the age verification, you had to like you change your age and stuff like that. So like I've been online, Twitter, Facebook, all that, from super young, which that I don't recommend because
mm,
yeah, the internet's not great, but it can be used well. And I think with Instagram, it's mainly just, it's still my personal stuff, but I try and post like reels or comedy stuff,
mm,
it, not recently, but that's what I try and use it for. So I
mm,
think, again, it's all about what you actually want to get out of it. Because if
mm,
you don't want to, build a career, or you don't want to, make reels or TikToks, and you just want to consume, as in like just watch videos and stuff, that's also perfectly fine as well. So I think, yeah, everyone has a different avenue on like how they use their social media. I guess the one thing I do like warn people of is posting too much about I guess like personal situations, because like
mm,
it's good to be personal in terms of like, people may be able to relate to this, or you're going through something and you feel like, you know it again, it can be relatable, it can be helpful, it can, whatever. um but yeah, I think there's a line there, and where it becomes like you're just sort of live tweeting everything.
mm.
Do you know what shit posting is?
Was that ship or shit posting? What kind of post?
Shit posting, like with a T.
Okay. No, do enlighten me.
Yeah, so shit posting, I feel like started in like 2016, but it's basically, it's a form of comedy, but it's like you post memes, but you also post whatever deranged thought pops into your head at any given moment.
Oh, right.
So there's a lot of that on Twitter. Most people use Twitter for shit posting.
Mm,
So I would do that, but I feel like there's a line. If you're going through something and your shit posts are getting darker and darker and darker, then
mm,
maybe it's time to log off.
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean it's I think it's such a like so many of these technologies, it's so powerful. Like you can make wonderful connections with people
Yeah.
online through social media that can be supportive and great. And then, but you can also encounter a lot of toxic stuff.
Yeah.
And then you can also, it's sort of, I mean, I know I find myself, there's a kind of hedonic treadmill of, of like, I mean, I'm excited to post stuff because like, whether it's like, little recently like little talking to the camera or stuff about the podcast or what have you, but I just like I definitely get like a high from seeing the likes, and there's a sort of like there's a I don't know how particularly healthy that is, but yeah, definitely it can, yeah, you can encounter, like for example, just on the the comedy collective, where I got great, absolutely fantastic feedback on my poster design for Edinburgh. Absolutely loved it. On other occasions, I've posted things, and I there's been like a strange thing, and there's been a person I've had to block, and it's just it's such a you don't know what you're going to get right in
Yeah.
advance. It's just very strange, isn't it?
That's the thing. I feel like the internet is sort of like a group chat with the whole world.
Right,
And
right.
obviously not everyone in the world is, your people. So, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it can be kind of hit or miss.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then yeah, so it sounds like but you're social media is involved in the process. I mean, going back to your process, you're having ideas, you're writing them down on the iPads. Occasionally, you're kind of reviewing them, moving them into Google Doc, and so on. Can you take us further through that process of like, you know, which ones are some of them are going on to put them on social media, other you say on stage, and then are you recording your audio and like sort of tweaking it? How does the evolution of the
Mm.
joke work?
Yeah. So like, for instance, I had a joke because I am like Christian. So I had a joke about like Jesus and comparing Nazareth to Milton Keynes, and
Oh,
it was very niche joke.
sounds cool.
But so like I wrote it, and obviously I wanted to test it out, so I tested it at I can't remember the name of Comedy Club now, but I tested it at this place. My brother was there, same brother from the first time,
Mm.
and he recorded it. I watched it back. I liked it, but there's some bits that I felt could have been stronger.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
and he also had some notes as well. So I went back into the document that from the notes app, edited that before moving it over to Google Drive. And then obviously I still have the video of the performance. So it's like, that I think that like five is on YouTube. But it's like, if people watch that and then they watch another clip of maybe the same joke a year later, they'll
Mm.
see it would have evolved or changed slightly.
Sure.
So I
Right.
think that's also cool as well. Cause sometimes I see, like I've seen with like James Acaster, like he's had jokes from like years ago and he's had like the same joke recently, but it's changed, it's evolved, the punchline's different,
Hmm. Hmm.
so and I love that.
Yeah. That's absolutely the evolution of the joke. Brilliant. Yes. And I was thinking, was there any? And yeah. And then so then right. And then you're putting that up on the YouTube, and then the social media comes in. Yeah, you'll to some degree, um, as well as like whether it's shit posting or getting into verticals. There's some extent to which you're sharing your comedy on the social media and getting connection with fans, or how is that working,
um
if at all?
Yeah, I think with YouTube is a little bit more organic because with Instagram, what happens when you share Instagram reels and you're not used to sharing that many reels, it first shows it to the people that you're mutuals with, which is just
Mm.
like, your friends, your family, other comedians, people in that circle. Um, and I don't know, I feel like strangers respond to me better than the people who know me.
Okay.
I don't know how
Okay.
that is.
Uh-huh.
But like stuff that I've pushed out where I don't have much mutuals, like stuff I post on TikTok would get like thousands more views than something I post on Instagram that would only get like 200 views.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I'm trying to like game the algorithm a little bit because I
Hmm.
notice sometimes if you move something from your main page to your Reels page only, it actually pushes it to people outside of your circle
Hmm.
rather than just keeping it to your followers.
Right.
But in the past, I have, as like a test, I promoted two reels actually, two separate comedy videos from two separate gigs. And I think I tested them like, I don't know which area, but I think it was like somewhere in the US. I just picked a random demographic.
Mm.
Um, and I tested it and it did well. And I got some followers and, more views. So I think it definitely works, but it's like you kind of have to try out different avenues because my ultimate goal is to reach more people. I don't just
Mm.
want to be sat in front of people who already know me because,
Mm.
um, so yeah, I will probably promote more stuff in the future. I think Instagram also rewards your account more. It's weird. It's like the algorithm can punish you, but it can also reward you. So
The algorithm moves in mysterious ways. It is very strange. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it also feels like a bit of a money pit. I've been, for various, festival shows and Edinburgh previews and so on. I've been, bunging bits of money into Instagram and Facebook, and I think I get, like sometimes, all right, 10,000 people have seen this, and then you've had maybe even 1,000 people allegedly redirected to your tickets page, but not clear that it's necessarily led to any sales. And
Mm,
yeah, I certainly have not cracked any aspect of the algorithm. It's I think time to move on to our next question, which is about the people that have had the biggest impact on your
mm,
life and comedy. And yeah, and people have asked, oh, what do you mean? I mean, just and to give you a chance to think, this could be, friends and family. It could be people you've met on the circuit, people that in the comedy stratosphere, or like a mentor or a high school teacher. You mentioned already Bo Burnham as somebody you were particularly interested in, but yeah, this is entirely up to you to give shout outs, or say who was holding you back. That you could go dark if you wanted to. But yeah, who would you say are the people who've had the biggest impact on your life and comedy?
yeah. That's a really good one. I think I actually find it kind of hard to have like comedy idols because I don't know. I don't know. I think obviously every comedian evolves and their career um changes. So there have been people who I've like, oh, I really like this person, this year. And then the next year I'm like, I'm not really feeling that. So,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
but there are people whose style of comedy I've really liked. I'm trying to remember his name. Okay, Norm Macdonald.
Hmm.
So I really loved him. Obviously, RIP, but um, also I loved, and this is more of like, within the time, within the context of what it was, Jerry Seinfeld.
Mm.
And again, like I'm saying within the context because if you were to do Seinfeld style jokes today, it
Mm.
might not land as well.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
obviously, when like you watch the sitcom and like you understand like in that world, it was I don't know. It was good for its time and ahead of its
Hmm.
time in that space. Um, but I feel like it might not translate well, but what does translate well is still that I don't know, that pace, that energy.
Hmm.
So I think there are definitely things that can translate across time.
Uh-huh.
Um, so even if jokes themselves don't. So yeah, I think there's definitely, things that I can take from each like period of comedy and um yeah, and who else? I also hmm I'm trying to not name someone
Okay.
because so I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm all about love and I'm very you know, I'm a loving person.
Hmm.
Um but it's like, there have been comedians that like I found on Instagram and I'm like, oh, they're really cool, or like they're from New York and blah blah blah. But then like I've met them in person and there's been like a weird thing going on, which
Mm.
then leads me to think because there's a whole conspiracy that I believe that I'm like at the center of, which sounds like really weird. Um, I'm not sure if I should go into it because it is a little dark, but I don't know what your audience are used to listening to.
Well, I mean, I think the audience is mainly other comedians who have all a bit of darkness in their soul. I think if you're comfortable talking about it, please go ahead. And I think that the audience, as I say, I think it's a lot of other comedians who are interested in hearing from their fellow comedians, really.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, to keep it short, I feel like there are some comedians who, like across the pond, who know who I am
Hmm.
without me knowing them, right? And I'll
Right.
explain why. Because basically, when I first started, obviously as a teenager, um, I would add like a lot of comedians on Facebook,
Hmm.
and long story short, had sort of like a fair thing with a comedian who was like a bit older, who was like 35 or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and So I think we started talking sort of just before I started stand up, but I was like interested in it.
Mm,
Um, and he was dating another well-known comedian at the time, and it was this whole thing. And
mm,
you know, the situation and the relationship between myself and him was completely inappropriate at the time. But I remember sort of looking into, like, years later, sort of like looking into that web and that circle, and
mm,
it's weird because like everyone kind of knows everyone, you know.
mm,
So I don't know, it's weird because whenever I'm really, and this could just be me thinking this, but it's like whenever there's a comedian who's like from New York, I'm like, oh, they probably know this guy and he's probably told them a different story and blah blah blah. So, um but yeah. So that's what it is. So there have been people who I've been like, oh, I like this comedian, I like their
mm,
style.
mm,
And they come to London, I go to their show and they're kind of a little off with me, or like,
mm.
or I'll just get like random comics again from the like New York circuit, like viewing my stories, and I'm like that's cool, follow me, please.
Mm.
But like they're not following me. They're not. It's kind of like just like a drop in kind of thing, which again,
Mm.
you know, it's fueling my paranoid delusions that I'm the star of this conspiracy theory. So
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing. It sounds, well, it's interesting to go back to that thing about the social media. It sounds like, and you talked about how you started with Twitter and Facebook very early and so on, and then like I guess at an early age, and just starting stand up, you were sort of connected into in a way into a world, and I guess was new for everyone where all this stuff could be discussed online. And,
yeah,
maybe like 50 years ago, it would have been a completely different story because people wouldn't have had that, avenues, as it were, through the sort of like the social side. So yes. And then you
yeah,
can like, and you're thinking, what do these people think of me? Yeah, yeah, that sounds complicated.
yes, it really really was. So um, but yeah, I mean, like I'm good. But I feel like the guy in question was like, looking back, it's like some things that you're okay with or you think are okay, when you're younger, you're like,
Mm.
actually, no, that's kind of weird. Like, he's 35, you shouldn't be talking to a teenager. He's, online. Like, that's a little suspicious, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's absolutely all these different communities that are like based on, webs of relationships with different people, and yes, yeah, 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 yeah. And then it's the other thing is of course that the things hang around and then people are telling stories. I mean, I guess there always was, and that's humanity's history is the rumor mill and so
Yes.
on. Yeah, no, I'm sorry that to hear that cause it sounds like currently causes some discomfort, but like as you say, you're okay, and it's like that's something
Yeah.
that's in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I think at this point it's more of like an afterthought because it's like life, like my life here, like not online, but my life in real life,
Mm.
has really dealt me some hurdles, especially like this past few months. So it's like that is small potatoes, as they say.
Right.
So it's not a thing, but I just thought I'll bring that up. I don't know how we got onto that, but
Well, I think it's the impact on your life and comedy, and that clearly
yes,
had a big impact. And of course, what's ironic is that sometimes the thing that has a big impact, and it's a big thing at the time, and then you move on, 2 years, 5 years, 12 years, and then there's something else that happens that like, oh, well, that's the biggest thing, and the thing that was big before kind of fades into, well, that was nothing by comparison. The passage of time is a very strange thing, I find. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I fully agree. And I'm just hoping because I say just came out. It was a relationship that ended in like mid-April. And I'm like healing from it. But it's like, people are saying time will heal everything. I'm hoping that's true.
Mm.
I, like to remain optimistic. But yeah, things are definitely looking better. So I do believe, the people that giving me advice were right. But it's interesting because it's like when you're in something, it's very easy to only see that thing or like
Mhm.
that, not even the situation, because even if the situation evolves, that emotional state that you're in feels like you're gonna be in it forever. At
Yeah.
least for me, that's, you know.
I think it's a common experience. I mean, there's that famous phrase, which is like, "This too shall pass," which is so difficult to believe in the moment. I mean, the things all do pass, but it often doesn't feel like it in the moment. But yeah, but maybe we can we can springboard from that into, positive shout outs. Obviously, your older brother who, took you to this first open mic. I mean, in the friends and families, and the, not people, not the big and the famous, but the people, in the trenches. Any shout outs to your friends, family, and people in the UK circuit?
Yeah, I mean, definitely to my older brother because like obviously looking back, like if he hadn't, you know, supported me during, the first ever show, um, who knows, maybe I just never would have found it, you know? Um, so yeah, definitely to him. And who can I shout out? I feel like shout out Sam White. I'm not sure
Oh
if
yeah.
you, yeah, really cool guy. And we started making like little videos together. We're gonna make more like sketches and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky that I do have a few like good comedy friends.
Hmm.
Like, people talk about comedians being like, I don't like shady people or whatever, which I don't really fully agree with, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'm lucky that there are a lot of good eggs in sort of my immediate world and immediate circle. So yeah, I'm trying to think of like who I can shout out that it won't be like cringy, you know. Um,
But those
yeah,
are good ones. Those are good ones. Like, Sam White is a friend of the show. I mean, we're having him on our comedy panel show, Joke Wranglers. Um,
nice.
I think is it even next week even? And yeah, we'll have to get him actually on this, one-to-one chat as well. That's brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, why would I mean? You say you don't want to be cringy, but that's like, I think that's not cringy at all. Shouting out to people who you get on well with.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's just because if I start to list people and then I'm just listing my friends, and then some friends I might forget, and then it's like, well, why didn't you list me? And you listed
Yeah,
Katie.
no, no, that there's a yes, it could be a booby trap there. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah. Well, maybe we move on to the penultimate question, which is about how drugs affect your perception of reality. And as I'm pains to say often at this point, to anybody listening, be careful out there. There's lots of substances. Just because some people have had a good or a bad experience on they talk about on this show, doesn't mean that you'll have the same one. Be very careful. There's a lot of things, and you can get yourself into trouble with substances. And then secondarily, of course it's drugs. We mean the illegal psychotropic ones. Not necessarily. I mean, different, comedians have come on the show and talked about all sorts of substances, whether it's, ADHD medication, or their struggles with alcohol, or, like fast food, or Andy Zapp talking about heroin in the 60s. It can be, absolutely anything. It's sort of, I'm really interested, is your body a temple and there's, nothing but pure water going into it, or are there particular things that you need, whether it's chocolate or something stronger, to get you through the day? And how do those things affect how you see the world?
So I I'm like the most boring person because I don't do alcohol, I don't do drugs. Like I always say, the only drug I do is antipsychotics. So,
Oh, okay.
I guess but it's more of a mood stabilizer that I had been taking and obviously tapering off it. So we're slowly reducing the dose, myself and
Hmm.
my doctor, because
Hmm.
I don't want to be dependent on anything
Right.
like for the rest of my life. But um, in terms of like my general life, again, super boring. Like I used to really love sweet stuff like sugar,
Mm.
which for some people can be really addictive. Um, but yeah, I've actually been on the keto diet most of this year.
Okay.
So yeah, again, like my what goes into my body is really plain and boring because I'm allergic to gluten.
Okay.
Um, and then I started doing keto on top of that. So I've then, cut out all carbs completely, all sugar,
Mm,
um, some vegetables that are more starchy and carby, like high in
mm.
carbs. Um, so really, the only thing I've been eating this year has been like meat and some vegetables and nuts.
Okay.
So that's and water. Water is my best
Mm,
friend. I
mm,
just,
mm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah. And well, you say boring. I think this is all very interesting. And so on the particular diet, having switched to that diet this year, how do you? I mean, there's I'm sure potential the health benefits physically. I mean, I imagine you're continuing it because you're feeling good. But does it also change your mood, you think, or how you see the world?
yes, 100%. Because I do think one of the research that I did into the ketogenic diet when I started it was that it causes a lot of mental clarity, actually.
Mm,
And there's also research to support, there are people who have reported that it had cured, quote unquote, cured their schizophrenia.
mm,
So, and again, take that with a grain of salt. There's a fantastic lady. I need to find her channel. It's like Living Well with Schizophrenia by Lauren something.
mm,
Um, but yeah, so her condition went into remission, so she didn't have any of the symptoms once she had, stuck with this diet. So I was really
mm,
intrigued. And I found like it really does help with mood, although it depends on like how long you're doing it for
mm,
because um, when you first start it, that initial first week, your body is adjusting from carbs as fuel to fat to fuel. So you're actually going to have a bit of brain fog, which is like the opposite of what you want before it actually increases your brain power.
mm.
And then when you go back to carbs, which is what I did today, which I don't know, I just decided today. Um,
Cheat day.
yeah. Um, when you go back to carbs, it resets, and then you have some fatigue and some brain fog, and then you go back to your usual self. So there's always that adjustment period when you're switching diets. Um, but yeah, I found when I was on it and had stuck on it, there is definitely a lot more clarity, focus, and yeah, it's really helpful.
Mm, mm, Yeah, well, no, that's great to hear that that's working for you. And then also you were mentioning the antipsychotics as a mood stabilizer and tapering it off. And I think that's everybody's objective, right? Is to, if they can, ultimately and safely, like keep their bodies as temples.
Yeah.
I assume that's where we're all trying to get to. I mean, I guess actually Big Tent, if that's the opposite for your dear listener for your objective, then but who are we to say? But so, but I guess that is also these, and you mentioned, early, struggles with depression and so on. I guess these antipsychotics are substances that, are impacting how you perceive the world. And I wonder if you're willing to tell us more about how they change things for you when you're taking them.
Yeah. So yeah, I find when I first got put on them, I disagreed with them a lot.
Mm,
Um, because not only am I adjusting to a new meds, but I think at the time in my life, um, I disagreed with the diagnosis. I won't say what the diagnosis is, on
mm,
here, but I disagreed with it. But also, it was more of like um, I was also put on like a high dose as well. So there's different side effects. So I had like weight gain, and I mean, it wasn't like super high, but it was, yeah.
mm,
Because compared to someone who's never been on any other meds, like you're gonna notice the difference. Um, so yeah, I think I really disagreed with it, and I found in subsequent years after taking it is I don't know. I'm the kind of person who had my life has always been kind of black and white, like
mm,
as in you live in, and I guess this leads back to like, childhood, and I had a really interesting childhood. I think obviously, I have a brother who I love and is fantastic, but a lot of it wasn't the best. So I kind of got used to living in like highs and lows. So, and I think that sort of translated into how I compartmentalize things and how I feel things. So it's my feelings were always, very sort of intense. Like if I love something, I really love it and I really care about it. And if something is upsetting me, then it's really upsetting me. And I noticed with these meds is everything was suddenly gray. Like I was
Okay.
unable to feel anything.
Mm.
So like not just the like not feeling the lows, but I also didn't feel the highs. Like I
Mm.
felt like everything was just mellow. Everything was just like middle of the road kind of. And I really didn't like that. And I thought, what if one of my initial fears when I was put on it was like, what if this affects my creative, you know, brain, my creative side. And I know that there are a lot of other creatives who may be put on something like this who, have the same concerns. And I will say, honestly, that as well as, being like mellowed out, I find after being on it for like, maybe 2 years straight, 3 years straight, um, it actually helped me write clearer.
Mm.
And when I say clearer, it's like just the way I'm organizing jokes and um I don't know, things are not as like because before I'd write a joke on a napkin and like scribble different parts of it and um sometimes it would be, you know, either forgotten or like, you know, um hard to sort of marry the different ideas
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
Um and yeah, that wasn't often, but that was the case sometimes. And then I found maybe this was when I was tapering off of it, or I can't remember the exact timeline, but there was a point in like the last few years where I felt like, okay, I'm actually like able to write a lot clearer than I have, and able to organize these things a lot clearer. And maybe because the mellowing out of myself, the not having the highs and the lows, um, maybe affected the focus as well and made, like if it's noisy in your brain, you're not
Mm.
going to be able to focus on like, one thing. Um, so I guess that quietening, I don't know,
Yeah, sure.
of, yeah, the quietening of my brain um, actually didn't hinder my creativity at all, I find. Um,
Great.
so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, cool. Very interesting. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Wonderful, wonderful. Um, yes, indeed. Well, and then that brings us nicely to well, is there a segue? I'm not sure. To our final question, which is, what does it all mean? The life, the universe, and
Mhm.
everything. And some people say, oh no, it's the big question. It's a scary big question. And I mean, if you want to go for the big question, absolutely. I'm very excited to hear what everybody thinks is really going on in this strange world or universe that we live in. But it can just be the simpler question of what gives your life meaning. What is the things that get you out of bed in the morning. But yeah, I'm very interested in any religious or philosophical or I think it's just so strange that we're aware and that we're able to communicate and we have thoughts and there's consciousness and just it's all very weird. Have you got any idea what's going on? Why we're all here?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that question on like the brief that you sent me, and I didn't really think too much about it, but I think for me, life is all about forgiveness. And, I think as human beings, we're navigating the world and we're all very social creatures. We're all sort of looking for something. We're all sort of, wanting to connect with each other. Um, and yet there's so many things that stand in the way. And, for me, I talked a little bit about it earlier on, like I've just been through something that was absolutely horrible. I felt like
Mm.
my heart was ripped out of my body. And, that really sucked. But then it's on the flip side, you're also thinking, well, okay, this situation hurt, but there's also a way to find peace and there's a way to find beauty and there's a way to rebuild. And yeah, I think, not just from a Christian perspective, but I do really think that forgiveness is like a huge part of the world because it's easy for people to, you know, allow their emotions, or to get stuck in things and, you know, I don't know, to, I'm trying to really formulate my thoughts here because I feel like I know what I want to say, but it's hard to articulate it.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I think living in a world where, for me as a Christian, I believe that God forgives us every day.
Mm-hmm.
There's no human being on the planet who is perfect. Um, so I think extending that same level of love, that same level of gratitude, that same level of, just forgiveness to each other. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
mean like, oh, someone's like upset you intentionally or someone, like, yeah, like that is important as well to, forgive in that scenario. But I also mean forgiveness in terms of grace, as in to
Mm-hmm.
give people more grace, to give them more chance. And yeah, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I mean, I think, yeah, forgiveness is a beautiful thing, and I think one only has to look at the people who are struggling to forgive and how that kind of like holding on to the past will, eat you up and just create problems. So it's I think forgiveness extremely powerful. I was interested there, and you went on about to mention grace, and it made me think. I guess I'm not actually sure what we mean by grace. I mean, I think my like, oh, grace, that means like doing things gracefully. But I mean, and you were saying like about the important to extend the forgiveness to each other, and I think we need to forgive ourselves as well. What does grace mean for you in that
Mm.
context?
Yeah, I mean, in that context, it's more of like, like people can do things or just even exist in a way that can sometimes rub you the wrong way,
Hmm.
or it can just annoy you. Like, I don't know, the way someone is walking to work every day and they're, interrupting your walk to work or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So that grace is all about like they haven't done something to you, like, intentionally, um but you still have that annoyance, you still have that like, oh, I really don't like this. So grace is kind of, it's like giving someone the benefit of the doubt.
Oh,
So,
okay. Yeah.
it's like, if I were to give someone grace, I'm just thinking, okay, well, they're on their journey, I'm going to be at peace, and I'm going to try and just give them as much love or as much, benefit of the doubt as I can.
Yeah. Forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yes.
Interest. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I mean, that reminds me of there's a Zen parable or there's some story about, if you're in a boat and like and another boat, then if the wind blows another boat and it kind of like bumps your boat, you're kind of like, oh, well, that was the wind, whatever. If somebody else is in that other boat and they are rowing towards you and they bump the boat into you, you're like, oh, and the reaction is to get angry. And the sort of Zen Buddhist thing is to say, this is all, it's no different from the weather.
Yeah.
There's no need to go out to, become angry about it. It's all, and I guess if you sort of see people of like as forces of nature, it doesn't mean that you necessarily then put up with behavior that you don't approve of or what have
Yeah.
you. But there's no need to kind of like generate additional anger and resentment and hold on to it for days and years and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I really love that example that you gave because it really is like that. Like literally anything can happen, and that doesn't mean that that person is, the one that's actioning it. Like you said, it might as well have been the wind. So
Right.
that person, that grace, as if they were the wind, is, I think that's the best approach to have, because, we all deserve, well, from a Christian perspective, again, bringing you back to that, it's like God doesn't love us because we're perfect, but um, because He loves us,
Right.
because,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and, I think that we deserve to be nice to each other and to give each other that same grace and that same love because
Mm.
it's what God would want for us. So, like, how
Mm.
can we expect to receive kindness from, a high power while treating, each other as if, your neighbor doesn't matter, or,
Right. Right.
um, that that to me just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting. So there's relatively few people on the podcast have been explicitly religious. We had Callum McIver, who's sort of a born again Christian, and he sees things in quite black and white terms. That there's a sort of like there's a struggle going on for all of our souls. Do definitely check out his episode for a very roller coaster ride there. I mean, we also had I'm gonna mispronounce her name, but I think it was Amalia Fuadi, who's grew up Muslim, and she was, it was fascinating to hear, the Muslim perspective on heaven and so on. I mean, I come from a very sciencey background, but I think I one of the interesting things, and a lot of science people are kind of like, well, there's no proof of God or this, that, and the other. I think the interesting thing is if you actually look at it very closely, there the scientific worldview is kind of like, well, it's like stuff first. There's matter, and we're made out of matter, and it's a sort of a cold, heartless universe. And there's scientific evidence, like oh well, you can do this, that, and the other. But actually, based on our individual experience, you can't prove it's not consciousness first.
Mm,
That like the world exists because we're conscious, and there's a lot of I'm quite susceptible to the sort of Buddhist school of thought, which is almost kind of consciousness first. And I've been very influenced recently by, or continue to be very strongly influenced by the spiritual thinker Eckhart Tolle, who brings in aspects of Buddhism and Christianity and other sort of mystic traditions and mixes them all together. And I would sort of, I guess I would like in terms of like God and Jesus and so on, that sort of seemed like, it doesn't really marry with science. Whereas these days, I mean, I kind of what Eckhart Tolle talks about is this sort of underneath all of these different religions, the different flavors out there. There's kind of like a sort of a sort of a set. He talks about, I don't know if this is true or not, like a sort of a one consciousness that he occasionally also refers to as God. And I'm very, like I'm not like a traditional scientist of kind of like, well, it's. I mean, I think to me, I just don't know. I've never had any kind of encounter with a thing that I would understand as God from the different,
mm,
religious traditions. Buddhism is kind of, in terms of what they say, which is like, well, don't take anything at face value. If observe internally and see if that matches what we're suggesting. And so it doesn't mean I believe Buddhism, but it's sort of like matches most closely, I would say, to my, where I am mentally. But I'm really interested to hear any more that you care to share about how Christianity is for you. It sounds like you believe there is a higher power
yeah.
that we can have a relationship with.
Yeah, 100%. And before I touch on that, I just wanted to say about, you said, you're not really in like a super scientist, but, you don't know. And I actually think saying that sentence, I don't know, is the more scientific stance.
Right.
Because science is actually all about, discovery. And, at one point we thought the earth was flat, and then it was a donut, and then it was a dinosaur or whatever. But what I'm saying is like, it's all about what you don't know
Mm.
and being able to learn and discover more.
Hmm.
So I find any scientist that can say definitively, "Oh, there is no God," that is not a scientist. That is,
Right.
it's a Satanist in a robe. Sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
but um, I think really to question and to think about, because for me, I think Christianity, God and science actually coexist.
Mm.
Um, because for me, I think science is really just the study of God's creation. Because, like you said,
Mm.
it's not, you know, at first they thought it was like nothing, but it's like, how can something come from nothing? And I think there definitely is scientific explanations for things, but I do think the overlap is a lot clearer in a way that both scientists and sometimes Christians get wrong as well.
Mm. Mm.
So I guess, when I, become a theology major, I'll let you know the answers to the universe. But for me now, all I know is, I serve a loving God, and
Mm.
that doesn't mean that it's ever easy. And, people usually ask me, how can that be within this industry? But I actually think sort of the tides are changing, because I think, in terms of not just comedy, but like the acting world as well,
Mm.
it's known for being, Sin City and very, fast paced, and actors doing drugs and after parties and blah, blah, blah. But I do think the tides have really changed, because now it's like you are more respected for standing your ground and for having your own convictions. And
Mm.
um, yeah, and it's very easy to sort of weed out the sort of wrong avenues for you, because
Mm.
um, like now, if you were to say to an acting agent, hey, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing a sex scene, or XYZ, or blah blah blah, they're more likely to be like, you know what, that's fine, we'll get you works in more Christian movies, or
Mhm.
movies that are
Mhm.
more family friendly, or
Mhm.
whatever. um Whereas I think before, it was more of like, well, you're closing doors for yourself. And
Mhm.
I had an agent when I was a little bit younger, and I refused to do any sort of like horror stuff, because it just, in terms of like, like I would do a psychological thriller happily, because I think
Mm.
stuff like that is really fascinating, but just horror, possession, stuff like that, I wouldn't want to
Mm.
do. Um, and I remember he was kind of like something along the lines of like, that's, you're limiting yourself, and this is like, so there was always this sort of like, oh, there's headroom to get them to do something that they compromise,
Mhm.
they don't want to
Mhm.
do. Whereas I think the industry now is more um safer, I think, I
Mhm.
other actors correct me if I'm wrong, but safer in the terms of like, you can choose not to engage in certain things without worrying that that's going to like shoot your career dead.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Hopefully, that is the direction of travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I'm just well, and I find. I mean, I'm also remembering we had Imran Yusuf on, who I think also comes from a sort of a Muslim upbringing background, and he also talked about God in a sort of anthropomorphic way, as in like he expects this or thinks this, and I'm just interested is like so I mean the sort of the connection that I have with the spiritual, from the sort of Eckhart Tolle part is more like this idea that, there is sort of like one consciousness, like where like we sort of like accidentally see ourselves as separated fragments in the universe, whereas actually, there's like consciousness is asleep in the mineral in the rock, and it's and then was it it's consciousness is have I got that wrong? But anyway, but this idea of this sort of like hierarchy of consciousness that goes from that, even inanimate objects have a sort of primitive sort of base awareness, and then it's like, it's sort of like dreaming in the plants, and then animals, and then humans are these sort of higher and higher levels of consciousness, but they're all somehow connected under the hood. And I don't think there's any particular scientific evidence for it, but that they're, and then that can be referred to as God. But what Islam and Christianity do is it's very personalized, because you can sort of talk about like a relationship with God, and I'm interested, is that something that just everyone in your upbringing has told you, that there is this relationship with God, or do you actually somehow communicate with God in some way? I mean, I'm only feel don't share anything you're not comfortable to share. It's just I'm sort of fascinated because I've never had that kind of experience, if you know what I mean.
No, of course. So I think for me, it's definitely personal. Like, it's something you need to encounter, because I've met some people who said, "Oh, I'm Christian because my mom is Christian,"
Right, right,
or "I'm Christian because I, was uh christened and never went to church
right.
after that again."
Hmm. Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
that, to me, that is not Christianity, because like God doesn't know you. You don't talk to him. You don't,
Hmm.
and there is really no plus ones in heaven, right? So God
Okay.
doesn't. you know what, just tag team your friend, and they'll come in. Like, no, it's genuinely, I remember when I was very young, obviously, you go to Sunday school and they teach
Mm,
you, well, this is what God is, and he's there for you if you're in trouble, or if you're not in trouble, or if you want to pray, if you want to talk or vent. And obviously, as a kid, I took that seriously. And
mm,
when I, would have like little kid issues, I lost a library book once,
mm,
right?
mm.
And I think this is the first time that I think it was the first time I'd like seriously prayed for something. And I was so upset. And I remember just praying to God, and I was like, God, please help me. Like, I don't remember the words I said. Of course, I was
Sure.
like 7 years old.
Mm,
But I remember praying about it, and like literally I found it. And it was, again, I don't want to like go into too much details because I feel like
sure.
some people might um go down the critical route and blah blah blah. But you know, um, but I found it in a place where I had looked before and
Mm,
could not find it. And
mm,
next thing I know, it is like right in the center of where, so, and to me that felt like, okay, well, that's God's way of saying that, like, he's got me, and
mm,
although, that's praying for a library book, that's, small potatoes, that's like a very
mm,
kid prayer. Obviously it evolves and evolves and evolves. And as you grow, you learn that he isn't just there when things are tough, but genuinely, just like any dad, any father, he genuinely like loves his kids so much that he wants to hear about your day. Like, he wants to,
mm,
so I think for me, definitely praying to God. But also, I was watching this reel the other day actually, and it was a lady saying how she was praying and she was reading the Bible, and like, sometimes Christians can get very stuck in like the obligation, or like, well, I have to, you don't have to read the Bible. Like, there's no way that says you have to do this, certain time or whatever. But there are some Christians who do it out of habit. And she was talking about that. And she said literally the Holy Spirit just said to her, like, we don't have to sit in silence and read. Like, let's watch a cartoon. Like, I
mm,
want to exist with you in doing what you love to do.
mm,
And I think that's so perfect because that is literally God. Like, he doesn't want us to just sit and do things ritualistically. Like, even when you're walking down a park, you can talk to
mm,
God and he'll be there. And like, for the main question people ask me is, well, how do you know that he's listening?
mm,
Um, and that's a really fair question from, like atheists or whoever. But I think God talks to people in different ways, but unless you try it, you probably won't get it, even if I
mhm.
tried to explain it.
Sure.
So I think for me, um, there are certain comforts, like certain feelings that I get, especially if you're in worship. There is like a physical feeling that you get
Mm,
when you
mhm,
are, you know, singing a worship song, or you're just sitting in the presence of God in a church. There's a physical feeling of peace and love, and it's honestly so calming. And then there's also, there's different ways that God can speak, but I've noticed, I don't know, it's like he knows each person and how they think, and I'm the kind of person who loves to know everything. And I like to think that, it's possible for me to know, and it's not at all. But I love to overplan and overthink and overstress and all this stuff. And because I'm that kind of practical minded, God sometimes will actually speak to me through practical things and through practical signs, and like things that I can tangibly see in the world. And then there's some Christians who can like feel things. There's some Christians who can hear things, but it's not like an audible. The way that they described it to me
mm,
is that it's not like an audible, like Santa Claus voice or whatever. It's more of like you feel it in your spirit that something is speaking to your soul.
Mm,
Um, and that, I don't know, that in itself, I think is an experience that everyone should, like, you know, at least want to experience, because we're all spirit, whether you believe in Buddhism or like any other religion.
mm,
um I think most religions will agree that we're not just a fleshy being, like we have a
mm,
soul inside of us. And to connect that soul with your eternal creator, I think that I if I wasn't a Christian, I would want so badly to be a Christian.
mm,
Because it's like, how can I not want that kind of love? I think for someone like me, who's also, I've been through a lot, and like in my prayers, I'm praying about the fear of abandonment and abuse and all of this stuff that I've been through. And to know that God, like, I don't know, I'm trying to like not tear up right now, but
mm,
um to know that God is still so present and still loves me and has brought me out of so many situations that would have completely destroyed me. um that is like a love that I do not deserve, but I feel like I don't deserve it. But it's also something that God has just decided that all of his children are worthy of, and he
mm.
wants us to know that we're worthy of it. um so yeah, that's, I don't know
Well,
if any of that made sense.
well, that was very beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing. And I know it's like, as you're saying, like you don't know how much to share because the people can like do all twist all the things with it. But no, thank you. I love to hear how people really feel.
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, they're absolutely fantastic. Sorry to have to move the show on, but I think we've hit time, and it's our audience, the millions of them around the world. Are great. They're saying, Penelope, where can we see more of your comedy? How can we get up there on the interwebs in person? Where should people be going?
Good question. So I will plug my socials. On Instagram, I am Pen V Official. No gaps, no underlines, just Pen V Official. On YouTube, I am Penelope V, I believe. I hope so. Um, and yeah, so that's where I will be. If you want to like see more stuff, or go through my old stuff, whatever, stalk me. I'm all for that. Um, so yeah, in terms of shows, I I am chilling. I have nothing to promote at the moment. So, that's, sorry to, you know,
No problem, no
but
problem at all.
when I do, I will obviously be announcing on my socials. So,
Right, right.
um keep your eyes peeled for that. So that's at Pen V Official.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll get all links to all of your socials in the show notes. Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks everyone. And remember, you can help support comedians on technology, people, and drugs by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and by following us on Spotify. Please do that. The algorithm will smile on us, I hope. Where you can also ask questions and add comments, and we love hearing from you. Certainly, we'll read those out on the show if we get any more great ones. And of course, also do check out our new sister podcast. Is a Joke Wranglers. That's a comedy panel show with two teams of two comedians, sort of wrestling it out to be the victor, the joke wrangler, to get the best jokes out of a series of 10 rounds. So do check that out as well. And we look forward to being in your ears again soon. Last word to our fantastic guest, Penelope Vee.
So my last word or sentence will be, um in my darkest moments, I have felt comfort and joy and peace through knowing that someone out there loves me. And obviously, that person is God. And I would love to extend this love and peace to everyone, even if you're not a Christian, even if you are so far from believing in any religion. I really hope and pray that you are all having a day filled with love and peace and joy. And I thank you all for listening.